Hey, dethroners, welcome back to the Dethroning Your Inner Critic YouTube channel. I'm Joanna Kleinman, psychotherapist, empowerment coach, and CEO of the Dethroning Your Inner Critic coaching and consulting company. And today I want to talk to you about how our personality can actually sabotage our life. So let's dive into this very interesting topic. So at the core of all human beings is this seeking to be seen, to be validated, to be accepted. That's primal. That comes from DNA that's embedded deep within us, right? We needed to be accepted by our tribe. Our inner critic is trying to prepare us for the times where we don't feel seen or validated or accepted. Now, remember, when we are children, that feeling is so overwhelming. It can be almost painful. It can be overwhelmingly painful to our body, to our nervous system, to our psyche. So we develop a personality starting when we're very young. And at the core of that personality, there are parts of our personality that are all about ensuring that we're going to be accepted, that we're never going to experience that deep, overwhelming panic feeling that we're unloved and we are not enough and we are not okay and there is something wrong with us. And that pain is a lot of where our personality comes from. That part that is so hidden in our unconscious automatic mind, that is our inner critic self. That's where a lot of the parts of our personality come from that people actually love about us, where we might be organized or we're fun or we're funny or we're smart or we're talented, right? We don't want to throw those parts of our personality away, but we've got to kind of understand what lies underneath the hood. All right. So we've spoken about this on this podcast many times before. We have that moment when we're young where we feel that intense shame, worthlessness, embarrassment, fear that we're unloved. And that's when we disconnect from ourselves, right? We literally disconnect from that inner wisdom, that inner peace, that inner balance and harmony. And that's what leaves a void. And it is that void that shapes a big part of our personality because our personality forms to fill that void. Now, we can start filling that void with anything. And when we try and fill that void, we become dependent on it. Okay. So just like some people become dependent on alcohol or drugs or sex, other people can become dependent on overfunctioning, overcompensating, being needed, becoming the strong one or the accomplished one or the successful one. And so our nervous system is constantly under stress because we're now conditioned to keep staying in that vicious cycle, right? And just like a drug addict or an alcoholic, right? We need more and more and more of the drug to get high. So it doesn't matter how much we've accomplished. It doesn't matter how many people say they love us. It doesn't matter how many people we've helped or supported. We keep chasing the next experience to fill the void. And when we fill the void, we get the big win in our business, or we get the promotion, or we buy the big beach house, or whatever. What that's also doing is it's helping us stay away from what's underneath that void, underneath the hole, right? Or kind of at the base of that hole. That's the root of our suffering. That hole right there is our old trauma that we first experienced a long, long, long time ago, right? So for me, my void, right, that my inner critic tried to overcompensate for, part of my addiction was to helping people. Now, that's a beautiful thing because now I do that for a living. But the issue is if I'm not aware of my inner critic and her need for other people to value me and validate me. The problem is I'm never at peace. I'm never satisfied. I'm never in gratitude because I'm always needing to get the next hit, right? To get the next high. So when we learn to disidentify with our inner critic personality, instead of feeling sort of like, oh my God, I'm naked. I don't even know who I am. Okay. What we start to discover is that it's those parts of our personality that have actually been blocking us for most of our lives, right? Rather than having that part of our personality be our friend, which we think it is, right? Because we've gotten a lot of good things from it. But now we're starting to discover that inner critic personality has actually been sabotaging us. It has not been helping us to live a more happy, fulfilled, balanced life. It's actually gotten in our way, right? Instead of making us stronger, it actually makes us weaker. It actually makes us more afraid, right? You can think about that in your own life, right? I just got off the phone with somebody who has been, rock star status her whole life. She was an athlete and then went into really high up executive in a company. And what she now recognizes is that she can't ever stop because she's got to make sure that she's the best at what she does. And she's got to make sure that everybody thinks that she's the best at what she does. And it has been costing her big time in the quality of her life. So see, that's the conflict right there, because even though it's something that we think we want, right? We want to be that rock star, right? And once we get to be that person, once we get to that level that we think we're striving for, we think that void is going to be filled, right? And when we start recognizing, oh my God, this has been the core of my life. This has been the core of my personality. This has been the core of what's driving everything in my life. It feels a little dangerous to let go of the only identity that we've ever known, right? And so we're like, nope, we're not going to do that because then everything's going to fall apart. So we just keep coming back to it. We keep doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results, right? Definition of insanity. So all of our anxiety is really rooted in that unmet need that we had as children. Maybe it was to be loved, to be valued, to be accepted, but it starts when we're little. It's the little girl or the little boy you, right? It's that little person inside of you that's screaming out, I need to feel loved and valued and adored and important. I need to feel like I matter. And this is the only way I know how to get it, is from other people. Because when we're children, of course we seek other people, but we're not children anymore. So for many of us, to be seen means that we're also being seen in all the things that we're trying to avoid, like the things that are way too painful to look at or to be in contact with. So one of the aspects of our inner critic is she keeps us running away from that deep part of ourselves. So we're on guard for the shoe to drop. Because as we're running away from feeling that deep pain, we're also trying to prepare ourselves for when's the next time we're going to feel it. We got to make sure that we control things and fix things and change things and make sure everyone's happy with us and no one's ever upset. Because if everything is fine on the outside, right? If that's all good, we won't feel that deep pain we've been running from for so long. So this is exactly why we can be lying in bed and we can literally be fantasizing about all of our life falling apart, right? Or some big part of our life falling apart. Now, this might be the first time that you are thinking, wow, I can identify with that. I'm always waiting for that next shoe to drop, right? I'm always stirring something up in my mind. And even when I get what I want, I'm still waiting for the next shoe to drop. And as soon as I get what I want, I'm on to the next thing that I think I need. So think about yourself in that, okay? This shows up in our relationships also. See, the healthiest relationships and the healthiest friendships, that's not what the ones you see on social media where everyone's holding hands and love is just wonderful and blissful, right? People use external perfection to mask that deep void, that deep feeling of shame, right? That deep void that we've been trying to fill for our whole lives. So if we're really looking at what a healthy relationship really is, might not be one that looks so perfect and happy and blissful on the outside, but it's an honest relationship where two people can tell each other the honest, painful truth, and there is a mutual willingness to face that mess head on, right? So in the misunderstandings and those intense feelings of pain and disconnection, there's that willingness to look at the current issue in the relationship and not run away from it, right? Or not cling to your judgments or opinions or ideal pictures, but to be willing to work together to own your own void and how that's playing a part in your relationship, to find a place of reconnection by being willing to take ownership of your own role, which is all about being willing to look at your own deeply hidden pain, right? So that's the willingness to own, you know what? I do pick fights with my partner because it actually makes me feel closer to my partner, right? That's an odd thing to say, but we do sometimes feel oddly safer when we're fighting because it feels like we are, getting ready for the shoe to drop, right? So we can feel our body tensing, right? We can zoom in on, oh my God, where's the danger? Where is the shoe going to drop? That's what early trauma does. So we often think that trauma is just stored in our body, but trauma also shows up when we're getting ready for the next possible danger. Right? It's like being tuned into, a radio station or a TV channel, right? Where we're so hyper focused on looking for the next possible danger. And that becomes the filter through which we see everything in our life. Could be your business, your boss, your friends. Could be anywhere in your life that you're suffering or struggling, because your automatic mind is way more tuned in towards that potential danger. So that becomes your filter. At any given moment, the world could be dangerous. So we're always on high alert, responding to the possible danger. And that's when we take things personally. That's when we feel it in our nervous system. And that's when we're most disconnected with ourselves. Okay. Because really what we're doing is we're only focusing outside of ourselves to see where the danger is coming from. And we suppress those feelings of shame and doubt and fear that we're not good enough, or someone will judge us or criticize us or abandon us. All right. Now that's stored in the body, not just emotionally, but physically. And if that is left to keep festering and keep being shoved down and to keep operating on top of, that's the basis of physical disease. So our inner critic has a huge sense of urgency, right? Because she's trying to eliminate the feeling of danger. But she can't, but she doesn't know that. So we have no patience for life to unfold in the timing of the universe. We want to see the changes right now. We want to see the changes in our partner. We want to have all the confidence first, and then we'll make the career shift. We want the guarantee and the certainty that it's all going to work out, that what we're going to do is not going to piss anybody off or not going to disappoint anybody, or they're not going to leave us, right? It's all going to work out in a way that's going to have us avoiding the intense pain that we first felt so early on. That's the core trauma. right? That's the N step of the mind method. MIND, N, neutralize the never-ending message, right? The never-ending message is your inner critic's message to you that's in response to your core trauma. And we all have core trauma. Some of the inner critic trauma that a lot of people may have experienced in their childhood, they might not even consider that to be trauma, but it is. So most of us have a sense in our life of not being seen and heard at some point. That's a very familiar wound for many of us. And so, especially as young kids, what do we do when we feel that? Well, we don't have many options other than to just disconnect from ourselves and focus everything outside of ourselves, right? And that's how we disconnect from that feeling. We focus on something else and then we suppress it. And so we're also disconnected from each other because we're all trying to hide our core pain from each other. We're pretending that we don't feel what we're really feeling, right? We use our fancy house and our degrees and our perfect body to cover up the fact that I really do deep down feel that I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy enough of being loved because of my faults and flaws. And so I'm going to pretend like I don't have any faults and flaws. And this is what I'm going to project onto social media. And I just want everybody to think I'm doing great and I've got everything together and life is just dandy and my relationship is awesome and my kids are awesome and my life is just fabulous and my business is flowing and here we go, right? And so everybody else looks like they have no deep core pain. Their spouse is the best, their vacation is the best, they're killing it at work, but that's not at all what a human being really is. Nobody. But if we don't realize this and we don't start seeing ourselves in each other, we keep feeling separate and alone. Now, this is exactly why I lead my Mastering Your Mind program in intimate groups so that women can see themselves in each other and we can really see that we're all way more alike than we are different. But this is just such an old script that we replay. Right? When I'm not feeling secure in myself, I now know that's not me. That's my inner critic. That's telling me the same broken record story that she's been telling me since I've been 4. And she does it almost every day. But now I see that the feeling that other people are not safe and they're going to hurt me and they're going to leave me, that's just about my own deep shame. And I blame them for making me feel like I'm not enough or I'm bad or I'm wrong when I'm in my inner critic self. But the reality is they're just being how they're being. They're saying what they're saying, even if it's awful or toxic. No one has the power to make me feel broken or damaged or unloved. We do that to ourselves. Now, we may choose to stay away from a toxic person, but that's because they're not owning their inner critic core pain. They're acting it out on us. But when we know better, we do better. That's what Maya Angelou says. So we can let go of that relationship or the job or the friendship. But not because we're in pain and anger about it. Instead, it's because we're so grounded in our authentic self that we know that this relationship or job isn't good for me. It's not really fueling my soul. I don't need to keep proving myself. I don't need for this person to validate me or make me feel seen or loved. I need to do that for myself. And once I can do that for myself and I can fill my own void, now I can make choices from what's in alignment with my authentic self instead of staying in these toxic situations and trying to get my needs met from other people. So our inner critic will always continue to create a narrative, right? A story. And then we have an emotional response to the story we've created in our heads, as opposed to what's actually happening. And that's a huge distinction. Now, when we know the difference between our inner critic mind and the mind of our authentic self, now we clearly see what is our inner critic story, right? M step, what's her thoughts and beliefs? I step, what's the emotions and the physical nervous system responses and the behaviors? N step, what's the never-ending message of my inner critic? What's actually happening? And that's when we get to the D step. The D step is design your life. It's a very, very different life when you're able to unhook yourself from that automatic mind, that automatic personality, and tune into something very different. So when our inner critic is waiting for the shoe to drop, she creates a lot of dramatic scenes, all right, in which we are the main character. So the stories our inner critic creates is just a reenactment of our childhood traumas that keep us in the same vicious cycle, right? Why do we leave one relationship only to feel the same way in the very next relationship with someone who was seemingly the polar opposite of the first relationship, right? Why does my son make me feel the same way my dad used to make me feel, right? Why, when my client doesn't get a sale, or or I lose a client, right? Do we automatically go into a feeling of not being good enough? Because we're triggered into our own core pain. And this is why you see many people in your life having what seems like temper tantrums, right? Their reaction is extreme, or your reaction is extreme. That's your inner critic addiction, to keep you triggered in your core pain so that you can be prepared for the next time that shoe is going to drop. But all it causes is more pain. So it's important to recognize that a stress response is really just an inner critic addiction. And here's the interesting thing. When someone else is in an inner critic addiction, that energy becomes contagious. It's all subconscious, right? Your physiology is responding to their physiology. That's in our DNA. So your physiology is going to mirror their physiology in response to being prepared for danger, right? Think about animals. They react to each other's energy, right? That's how they communicate. Oh my God, there's a predator, there's danger. So depending on the family we were raised in, right, that plays a big part in our own physiology, right? It plays a big part in our indication signs, right? That's the I step of the mind method, the blinking red lights that alert us that our inner critic self has taken over. So when we're children, we're so highly aware of these danger signals because we have to be, right? And then how that plays out when we're adults is, let's say someone's mad at us, right? Well, now I'm mad at that person because they're mad at me. Now I'm tense. And now the dynamic is that we're both in this flood of emotion and reactivity. And we're really reacting to something that we feel deep in the moment, which is core pain. So the surface level fights are really just two people that are really just seeking connection and validation and love from each other, but they don't know it because they're totally unconscious. And it's too painful to feel like you're being rejected or unloved or unseen by that other person, especially if this is a person that you love or a person whose approval you're seeking. So we distract ourselves from that core pain by acting out. We either act out on them, or we act out on ourselves, or we act out on both. Right? So that's why I created the mind method, because the mind method is about recognizing what's happening in your own body, in your own mind, in your own nervous system, deep in the crevices of that mind, all in your subconscious. Right? So the fact that you have that experience with your partner or your boss or your friend or your child, and you start to get inwardly all stirred up from that other person being all inwardly stirred up, that's your inner critic and their inner critic doing the tango. right? So seeing your inner critic in its entirety allows you to find your anchor in your authentic self. It allows you to see that you do have a dark side. You do, but you're also fantastic. See, for me, when my inner critic is in control, she doesn't want to see that dark side. But when I'm standing in my authentic self, I can own. Part of my personality is I can be selfish. I can be self-centered. Hey, I can even be judgmental and controlling sometimes, right? But when I'm in my authentic self, I have so many other parts of myself that override that dark side. And I'm working on my dark side just like everybody. Well, not everybody, everybody that's doing this conscious work. Okay. Now I recognize that my inner critic is the one trying to make everything on the outside be okay so that I don't have to feel that that shoe might drop. She's only concerned that no one is going to be unhappy with me. I won't have failed. I won't have dealt with any pain or uncertainty. But guess what? I can deal with all of it. I have dealt with all of it. I don't have to keep running away from that. And that is the very thing that's gotten me further in life than anything. If we can really look at our dark side, if we can fully own our dark side, if you know what your deepest pain is and your deepest fear is, and you can spot it when it's running you, now you have a choice. Now you can find your anchor. Now you can find your grounding. And you can return to your authentic self who knows that you're an incredible human being, that you have faults and flaws, and that you're an incredible human being. Right? So you don't need to be so guarded or defended when someone says they're upset with you or they're disappointed in you, or even they don't like you. See, what was once intolerable, too painful, avoid at all costs, can actually become neutral. Right? Now, we've lived this way for so long, right? Thinking that we've got to bury our pain. And the goal of life is to just show everyone how great you are and how much you've accomplished and to keep getting to the next level, right? But here's the thing, what creates a life that's truly magical is our willingness to sit in the pain, to sit in the eye of the storm and not run away from our shame and our inadequacy and our fear, and to really look at the hidden parts of ourselves so that we can use it for the highest level of consciousness. Because living a conscious life is about intentionally anchoring yourself in a very different mind with different thoughts and beliefs about you and your life and other people, so that you can stop having the foundation of your life be about trying to ensure that the shoe doesn't drop, because that's when we lose ourselves. You've got to find your anchor. You've got to find your footing in your authentic self, because we're never going to have it all figured out. And your inner critic will always be afraid that you're not going to make it. That's why you've got to do your inner work. That's what the mind method is all about. If we can get underneath the unconscious mind and see it for what it is, we're no longer swallowed by our inner critic self. We're no longer swallowed by that old personality. And we can actually see our inner critic continue to try to demand that other people give us our value and our worthiness, and that we can feel respected by them and loved by them. But we can just see that's her automatic. So creating the space between ourselves and our inner critic, that's what settles our nervous system. That's where we can see a new self emerging. That's our authentic self. And for many of us, we almost never have access to our authentic self because it's been dominating every important area of our life. So the question that you need to ask yourself is, what is the feeling that's underneath my inner critic's story? What's the unspoken need that I didn't get when I was a child. We can see it in other people too. We can actually learn to have empathy with other people's core pain when they're acting out, when they're being their worst selves, even if it's directed towards us. I mean, that's a skill set that we have to continually practice, right? That means really understanding our nervous system feelings, our physiology, our core trigger, and getting to the point where we don't give that part of ourselves over to any other human, because we can see our trigger right away and we don't get involved in our inner critic story and drama. We can recognize what's happening in our own body, in our own emotions, and we can learn to settle ourselves, right? Now, don't attempt to get into somebody else's inner critic attack and try and fix it and change it, because you can't. You can only unhook yourself from being in an inner critic attack, okay? And you can quietly put your hand on your heart. You can take a breath, and you can literally say to yourself, okay, that's their inner critic. And I am going to just sit in the storm of their spiral, and I'm going to let them be upset and disappointed, and maybe even say, I'm taking my love away. That's about their pain. It's not about me. Your inner critic wants to make it about you by saying, how dare they disrespect you? How dare they treat you badly? That's their behavior. It might be bad, but they're not making you angry. You are. You can walk away from toxic behavior. You can end a relationship, but that doesn't mean you have to do it while you're in anger, hurt, rage, or shame. And guess what? Other people's reality might not match yours. Stop trying to get them to see their role and what they do. Some people are never going to be able to do that. Okay. And that's because their inner critic is only living in the mistakes and the pain from the past and the imagined dangers of the future. They don't know how to be present. They don't know how to tune into gratitude. They are 100% focused on warding off danger. Again, that's the purpose of the mind method and mastering your mind, right? To use this to live in the present moment. And when somebody's acting in a toxic way, that's about them. And they're literally experiencing some wave of emotion that they can't tolerate. And so they're dumping it on you. They're dumping their emotional pain right onto you. And here's the thing. You may want to ask yourself, has my inner critic become accustomed to this? Has my inner critic built up a tolerance for this? Because many people will stay in circumstances and situations and accept behavior that is really not okay, right? Even if it's just snarky comments, not okay. But your inner critic is so addicted to the worry that someone might leave you, or even the blame and outrage, right? Because she's preparing you for that shoe to drop. And that's what's sucking away so much of your energy and attention, right? So, an example of getting more tolerant to your inner critic's addiction is that you need to have more and more and more to feel good, right? Talked about this a little bit earlier. So for somebody that's an alcoholic, you need more and more and more alcohol to feel like you're drunk. Well, the same is true for stress and overwhelm. We need more and more and more stress to feel like we're preparing for that shoe to drop, right? And that feels familiar in some odd way. It feels comfortable. If we're in worry, if we're in guilt, if we're in overfunctioning, if we're overscheduled, if we're so stressed and so busy, it almost feels like it's relieving our pain because in some way we are preparing ourselves for danger. And our inner critic's tolerance for this, for overfunctioning and overscheduling and being stressed, is just really high. And so we get addicted to being trapped in these vicious cycles, beliefs, and emotions. And we stay in this heightened sense of being alert all the time. And it's all smoke and mirrors, right? That feeling like I can't just sit here. I can't do nothing. I've got to stay busy. I've got to stay productive. I've got to keep striving. At the bottom of all of that is the anxiety of all the things you're trying to avoid. All those feelings have been shoved away, and you have not given yourself the space, the time, the permission, the room to let it come up so you can see it. See, when we're not attending to our inner world with ourselves, that's when our inner critic is attending to something on the outside that feels stressful, but it feels like we're controlling the danger. So if I were still in a space in my life where my inner critic was hijacking my life, I would still be unloading on my family when I had a stressful day or I was worried about something, right? I was worried that I wasn't doing enough or I wasn't capable enough. I would get that all over my husband and my kids. Now, those are very deep and old, deeply entrenched neural pathways in my brain. So if I'm not practicing the mind method every day, right? That's my method that I use. I'm back in those old neural pathways. And it's now completely different because now I know how to unhook myself from that same pathway. I let go of the parts of life that my inner critic was trying to control. When I'm grounded in my authentic self, I don't have the tolerance that my inner critic has for stress and overwhelm and unhappiness and control. I won't tolerate it. So your inner critic keeps you out of a relationship with yourself at all costs. And she does that. She blames you. That's how she keeps you out of a relationship with yourself. Or she'll blame someone else. Or she'll create a narrative that she uses to keep you away from seeing and feeling what feels too vulnerable and too uncomfortable. So the mind method and mastering your mind is about building awareness, building acceptance. And in that acceptance, that validation of yourself, you're starting to open up to see who you really are. It's the building of the space between your inner critic's automatic response and all the drama that goes with that, and what life looks like when you're rooted in your authentic self. And that's when we start to recognize, you know what? I can create that space between my inner critic self and my authentic self. So that when I start to have those familiar thoughts and emotions and body sensations, instead of getting all worked up, right? And then needing the pain relief of blowing up like a volcano, and then being in a shame cycle and then apologizing for it, right? I can choose something else. But that's how we get trapped in these broken systems within our family, within our businesses, within our relationships, within our relationship with ourselves, right? So what changes in life when you have the courage to look at the places where you've been swallowed by your inner critic self? And you're in this cycle where you're picking fights with people, or you're exploding on people, or you're sabotaging yourself, or you're feeling drained and exhausted and overwhelmed. See, I want you to not only live an incredibly beautiful life, I want you to reach beyond where your inner critic has convinced you that you should stop. And most of us have no idea that we're trapped in that. We stay so trapped in our inner critic's narrative for our whole lives. And then we get to the end of our lives and we say, God, I wish I had just opened up that business, or I wish I had just become that coach or that therapist, or I wrote the book, or I lost the weight, or I went for that relationship, or whatever the case may be, right? Because we were so trapped in that narrative that we're just not good enough yet. We don't have the confidence yet. And then we keep trying to get it only to find that it's the dangling carrot that we never get. I want you to have the exact steps to no longer participate in your inner critic's anxiety, control, worry, and instead know how to get present to what's in your nervous system, what's in your mind, and what's in your heart. See, this work is not about being all zen and all at peace and everything's fabulous, okay? It's about being able to ride the choppy river that life can be and know how to manage your internal energy, how to stay in flow, how to be able to stand in the eye of the hurricane and to know that you'll be okay, to not get swept up in your inner critic's drama and not get swept up in other people's inner critic drama, to know how to create more peace for yourself no matter what happens, because you've done the work to train yourself to not join in with your inner critic's drama, with all her thoughts and beliefs and emotions and behaviors. It's a superpower. And it is a game changer of our life, because now you can be untethered to somebody else's drama, to their opinions, to their judgments, untethered to your own judgment, your own deep shame, your own inner critic's attempts to keep your pain hidden. You can know your inner critic's triggers and spot them a mile away. And you can find forgiveness for yourself because you know this isn't your fault. There are certain conditions that created this inner critic survival mechanism, this need for drama to avoid that underlying initial trauma. You can forgive your past actions, your past mistakes. You can take responsibility for your own behavior, for your own things that you wish you didn't do in the past, but you can find forgiveness for yourself. And at the same time, make room and space for the change that you want to make as part of your own healing. So for those of you who are coaches or practitioners or healers or doctors or teachers, if you want to know how you can become a mind method practitioner and take the work of the mind method into your own business, I'm beginning a mind method certification program in October of 2024. So if you're interested in hearing about that, or you're interested in participating in the next Mastering Your Mind program for yourself, go to my website, dethroningyourinnercritic.com, and schedule a clarity conversation with me. Thanks for tuning in today.